So, boy, I'm really excited that we're back here again on 9 o'clock here on Sunday morning, and I'm really grateful to everybody here who's gotten out of bed and made this part of their life. And I'm also grateful to those who are streaming in this morning. So just a few words. Lise is very well known in our world today, but even better is that she's brought Jeff and Anya and Zach's girlfriend here to cheer you on. You got your home team here. I love that. And your 20 years of membership, or 20 plus years of membership here. It's amazing to me because we produce a lot of things in the office and I don't get a chance to read everything before it goes out. So yesterday I actually read Lisa's biography, which I had never read before. And I just said, are you really the first of your generation to go to college, and then rose up to be the vice chair of your college too, which is an incredible thing. Mm-hmm. Just, I hope that all of your family is alive to have seen you do that. Really beautiful. I'm also chuckling that you have chuckling is the wrong word, but noting that you have a diversity certificate from Cornell. And Tom, who spoke last week about Cornell, and Jill, who did all the sound here, has to do with Cornell here too. So clearly Cornell is taking over our lives. I remember when you first went and did all that great work at King, and now the great work you're doing at Future 5. But what I'm really grateful for is the great work you're doing here at St. Mark's. And so I just want to say, if you haven't been to one of our courageous conversations, which I'm sure you'll say a word about, I hope you'll come on the Wednesday. But please come talk, because they want to hear from you and not from me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. And I'm just going to get set up just a little bit. It's really a pleasure to be here this morning with all of you, and I'm going to do a little exercise, probably more for me than you, but I think it's important. So I want you all to stand up for a moment, and I want you to turn around and greet the person behind you. Very good. And then I want you to turn around and greet the person in front of you. And if there isn't, I will greet you. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. And then I want you to keep standing. I want you to turn and greet the person to your left. And then I want you to turn and greet your person to your right. Keep standing. If you haven't greeted your spouse or your significant other, now is the time to give that person a kiss or a hug. Good. So what did we just do just now? What did we just do?
We got friendly.
We did, and we also blessed each other. In the name of the Father and the Son. Amen. Okay. So that was our little warm-up this morning. It is indeed a pleasure to speak with you, and more that as a congregation that we are committed to unpacking what we know and what we wish to know as we uncover our relationship and season of racial healing, justice, and reconciliation. So where are we now? The Reverend Rowena Kemp gave this quote: "The question now, how do we get to places where some think racism was resolved? We need to sit with each other. We need to bring people to an understanding. That is still very painful for me." I don't know how many of you get this. If you have it, read it. It's very good. And the last part speaks about the strategic plan for the church and what we're doing today. And as this is a teach-in, I thought it might be helpful to share some background. Recently, I was pulled into a reading, an article that spoke to me by the headline, "When You Walk Through the Valley of the Shadow of Death." Reading this, I found an understanding of race as a double-edged sword, the edge that brings us to a blind spot, but the opportunity to ask questions. And regarding my own understanding of this work, I get asked, will you teach me what to do? Or can you show me what to do? How can I use my privilege to help, regardless of all we are saying the same thing? Teach me what to do. Teach me to be a better woman, a better man, a better child. The problem, not the better way, but really, what is the easier way? For it's quite easy to place the burden on someone else. All of this leading to the elephant in the room and no easy answers. There is no specific what do you do. There are no specific actionable steps you can take. You have to walk into the valley of the shadow of death. You have to walk it alone, and you have to know there is no other side you will ever reach. Race is an idea, not a fact, and it questions and demands answers from the conceptual rather than the factual realm. American history offers up a very large bounty of commentary and what it means to be non-white, moving easily between alternations in the meaning of race as color, from colored to Negro to African American to Black to African Americans, always associating the idea of Blackness with slavery. Forgetting to pay attention to histories equally confused and flexible discourses on white races and the old and very old slave trade from Eastern Europe. Work plays a central role in race talk because of the people doing the labor, simply putting them at the bottom. Today, most Americans envision whiteness as racially divided, though ethnically divided. This is mid-century thinking. However, this wrecking fell only on 3 races: Mongoloid, Negroid, and Caucasoid. As long as racial discrimination remains a fact of life, and statistics can be arranged to support racial differences, the American belief in races will endure. You see, when you ask a Black person to teach you to be a better white person, you are scratching a wound that has been carved so deep into them they can feel the pain and all in their bones. It's been a forced walk into the valley of the shadow of death. Folks had to walk this path alone. It's like, I'm happy, I'm all grown up. And then all of a sudden you say, I don't really like this. I'm hot, I'm thirsty. Can you drive me across to the other side? Then we question when people of color complain about race, but not take the time out to fix it. This is because the question has been heard so many times before. The hitch across the valley is just a little too hot. It's boring, it gets tiring, and just hard to walk all by yourself. Those folks who spend that time preparing themselves for the journey, knowing all too well they will never finish. They entered the valley of the shadow of death, fully knowing their feet would blister, their mouth full of sand, and that they would die in this place. Those are the folks whom we can help. There's trust. We will share our water because they have chosen to be with us even though they might not make it. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. My experience in 3rd grade, I was asked to play the role of an Indian. That's what it was called. It's Native American now. I was so excited for the chance, and I was given this brown costume, this frayed brown costume. And it was so unwelcoming, but I didn't know that at the time. But I was so happy to bring this costume home. And when I brought it home, I showed my mom. I said, Mom, I'm going to be in the Thanksgiving play, and I'm going to play the role of an Indian. And folks, you didn't know my mom, but my mom was a force to be reckoned with. She's here today. Thank you, Mom. She said, she looked at the costume, she said, there's no way, you're not wearing this. And the next thing I knew, we were in a taxi, because we didn't have a car, in a taxi up to Jack's Fabric Store in Port Chester. And my mother picked out this beautiful flaxen fabric for her to make this costume for me. And she picked out all the black piping that went along with it, came back that night, and she made this costume for me. And I was upset because I thought Ms. Brockwell, the teacher, was not going to be happy with me coming back with this new costume. And gave my mother a fit about it, and she said, you know what, if you're going to play the role of the Indian, you're going to be the best looking one out there. And I was. And I think that's when it started to understand, you know, if you're going to put yourself out there and be there and represent, you've got to know what that feels like. So I grew up in Rye, New York. Rye, not too far from here. Rye was a privilege. I attended a great high school. I was the second black cheerleader in the school's history. The school is well over 100 years old. My sister, the third. I played the lead role of Lola in Damn Yankees. Now, I did it on a dare because I didn't want Joanna Seacole to get it. Little did I know that I would get it. And I didn't know how to study for a script. I had no idea how to do that, so I had to learn how to do that, but that taught me a lesson too. But I didn't know there was a scene in there where you had to kiss. And that was a little disarming for me because here he did not look like me. But how it was for that teacher to say, this is gonna be fine. You are both gonna be fine. And when you kiss on stage at Rye High School, no one's gonna have a problem with it. Whatever Lola wants, Lola gets. It was a good play. So 10 things you guys should know about race. Race is a modern idea. The ancient Greeks did not divide people according to physical distinctions, religion, status, class, or even language. Race has no genetic basics, not one characteristic, trait, or gene. Human species don't exist. Modern humans haven't been isolated enough to separate into species. Skin color is only skin deep. Most traits are inherited independently. Most variation is within, not between races. 85% exists within any local population. 95% exists within any continent. Big point. Slavery predates race. For much of human history, societies have enslaved others. Race and freedom evolved together. The United States was founded on the racial principle that all men are created equal. But the early economy was based on slavery. I have to stop for this one point because I need to let you know that my family, we are descendants of William Henry Harrison, the 9th President of the United States. My great-grandmother was born in Prince George County, one of 15, born free. All men are created equal. Race justified social inequalities as neutral. As the race idea evolved, white superiority became common sense. It helped justify slavery, the Indian conquest, the exclusion of Asian American immigrants, and the taking of Mexican lands in spite of democracy and freedom. Race isn't biological, but racism is real. Race is a powerful idea that gives people different access to opportunities and resources. There are advantages disproportionately that channel wealth, power, and resources to white people. Colorblindness will not end racism. Pretending it doesn't exist is not the same as creating equality. To combat racism, we need to identify and remedy social policies and institutional practices. So really, how do we create positive cross-cultural interactions? We have to create some common goals that require us to collaborate with people outside our in-group. For example, the Greeks and the Turks, a long history of conflict until 1999, took an earthquake to bring those countries together. We are a people are reflective as a jigsaw puzzle. We're all composed of interdependent parts. In the metaphor, the body of Christ preaches interdependence, which we seem to think and believe this fullness lies within the boundary of our own cultural group, often referred to as a 5,000-piece puzzle with 5,000 duplicate pieces. This line of thinking runs contrary to the interdependent of the body of Christ. I'm going to read this. It's a little long, but I like this passage because I think it's important. This is Corinthians. Even so, the body is not made up of one part, but of many. Now, if the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. If the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has placed the parts in the body, every one of them, just as he wanted them to be. If they were all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, but one body. The eye can't say to the hand, I don't need you. And the head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you. On the contrary, those parts of the body seem to be weaker are indispensable. And the parts that we think are less honorable, we treat them with special honor. And the parts that are unpresentable, they're treated with special modesty, while our presentable parts need no special treatment. But God has put the body together, giving greater honor to the parts, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. Now, you are the body of Christ, and each one of you is part of it. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Peggy McIntosh. Peggy McIntosh is the director of the Wellesley College Center for Research on Women. And Peggy speaks about white privilege and male privilege. And she speaks to the daily effects of white privilege and how that's affected her life. And what she has, her paper really goes on to speak about what people of color cannot count on in these conditions. So I'm going to read what Peggy McIntosh, as a white woman, speaks about what people of color cannot count on. I can, if I wish, to arrange to be in the company of people of my race most of the time. I can avoid spending time with people whom I was trained to mistrust and have learned to trust my kind or me. If I should need to move, I can be pretty sure of renting or purchasing housing in an area which I can afford and in which I want to live. I can be pretty sure that my neighbors in such a location will be neutral or pleasant to me. I can go shopping alone most of the time, pretty well assured that I will not be followed or harassed. I can turn on the television or open the front page of the paper and see people of my race widely represented. When I am told about our national heritage or about civilization, I am shown that people of my color made it what it is. I can be sure that my children will be given curricular materials that testify to the existence of their race. If I want to, I can be pretty sure of finding a publisher to publish my piece on white privilege. I can be pretty sure of having my voice heard in a group in which I am the only member of my race. I can be casual about whether or not to listen to another person's voice in a group where he or she is the only member. I can go into a music shop and count on finding the music of my race represented, or a supermarket where I can find foods that represent my culture. Whether I use checks, credit cards, or cash, I can count on my skin color not to work against the appearance of my financial stability and reliability. So what I like to think about is that you all are wearing something on your backs. It is called the Invisible Knapsack. I wear one too. And in that knapsack, if you think about what knapsacks mean, you're carrying a lot of stuff. You might find that old banana that's been in there for the last couple of months. But we all have an invisible knapsack, and often we forget to unpack all that lies within. So think of another cultural group you would like to build a bridge, and consider the many cultural groups within our church race, gender, class, education, politics, marital status. How do we as leaders plan to lead others into cross-cultural unity? So some ways to think about this is, and we've already started, we've had our courageous conversations, we've had 2 dinners, we have another one coming up on November 20th. I encourage you to continue the conversations, and that these dinners conversations aren't going to stop. It's only going to stop during December. We'll start up again in January. But taking a leap into the unknown in order to find success stories that lay outside the concept of right Christians and wrong Christians. We may not know exactly where we are headed or how we're going to get there, but we do know how to imitate. Christina Cleveland, she's an amazing read. I do have the book here. I'm just going to show it. It's called Disunity in Christ, Uncovering All the Hidden Forces That Keep Us Apart. It's a wonderful read, and I will put that out there for Father Peter, that maybe we can share that. But she referenced Jesus' everyday acts like washing disciples' feet. She says, I can't imagine washing disciples' hairy and crusty feet. But Jesus crossed the boundary, and then after would have expected him to ask for his feet to be washed, because that's what we do. We expect someone to do something nice for us after we do something nice for them. Instead, Jesus asks us that they go and wash someone else's feet. He crossed the boundary to cultural understanding, and he was serious about crossing boundaries to pursue others. He showed us how to do it. If I said to you now, if I came up to Rick and I put my hand out like this, you'd probably slap me 5 and I'd go. But if I did all this fist pump and all that, you wouldn't know what to do, right? But if I did, Sweet Caroline, there you go. So today you're going to be singing that song all day. But it's as simple as that. It's thinking about how do we cross that bridge. Cultural differences and interpretations across all groups. And it includes awareness and respect without making assumptions that everyone from a particular background holds the same beliefs and practices. That we unpack the culturally informed assessments you make on theirs that can really impact your relationship through honestly reflecting on some of the perspectives and assumptions. The beauty of anti-racism is that you don't have to be free of racism to be an anti-racist. The beauty of anti-racism is that you don't have to be free of racism to be an anti-racist. Anti-racism is the commitment to fight racism when you find it, including yourself. And it's the only way forward. Thank you. So I'm happy to take some questions, but I do want to share this one story with you that I did not share. As Father Peter mentioned, that I am first generation. I am the first in my family to graduate from high school and college, but my journey to get there was a challenge. You see, I was an average student, below average student. If I had to take the SATs today, I wouldn't be there. But I attended Rye High School. Rye was a school of privilege, and as I said, I did all the other social things, but I didn't pay attention to my grades. So it was late May, maybe early June, where everyone was getting those letters going to school, and no one was coming to me. There were 1,500 students in our high school, 40 of which were black. No one was paying attention to us. So I came home, I told my mom, I thought the only way I could get to college was to join the Navy. But I didn't even know how to swim, but it just seemed like the easiest way to do it. So when I came home with that letter, she looked at it, she said, there's no way. You're not going to the Navy, you're going to go to college. And the next thing I knew, my mother made a phone call to the school counselor at Rye High School and said, if my daughter isn't at college within 24 hours, I'm coming down there, I'm going to grab you by your necktie, I'm going to tie it to the drawer, and I'm going to slam it 3 times. Next thing I know, this young lady was on a train up to Boston. I was 17 years old. They sent me to a college called Pine Manor College. It was a junior college at the time, all women, all well-to-do, very white women, well-to-do. And I remember this nice little blue coat that I had on and going up there and, on the train, and I meet with the director of admissions and I give her my story and she interviews me and she says, you're in. I said, that's it? She goes, you're in. Get back on the train, I come home to my mom, I go, I'm in, Mom, I'm in. She says, that's great. She says, how are we gonna pay for it? Don't know, gotta figure that out. Here's when power of God and belief comes in, because see, I was raised as a Baptist. I attended the Bethesda Baptist Church in Port Chester, New York. And it was my great-grandmother at that church who she was one of the founders of the church, but it was Reverend Hardman that came to my grandmother and said, you know, I have a family that wants to pay for someone to go to college, but he wants to pay for a male. And my grandmother said, he said, but I know you have a granddaughter, and I know she wants to go to college. She goes, yes, she does. And he goes, well, I don't know. I'm going to see if he'll be willing to meet with you. And the next thing I knew, I was in a cab on my way up to the Rye Ridge Deli to go meet with this family, a white family, a family that owned a lot of real estate in Rye, New York, and was looking to pay for a black male. I walked in, I sat down with this family, they interviewed me, and he was just firm on his belief he was not going to pay for my education. He goes, I want to pay for a male. And I said, why? You know, I need this opportunity. If you don't pay for my education, I can't go there. And I asked him again, why? And he said, well, the reason why I don't want to pay for a female is the only thing you're going to do is get pregnant and have babies. And I said, really? I said, well, that is not my job. I had to raise my sister and my mom, and I said, the only opportunity I had was really you paying for my way. This is well before cell phones. I had to wait. But he did call, and he said, you know what? I'm going to give you a chance. I'm going to give you the money to go to school. But there's one thing you have to do. You have to maintain C or better. You go below, I'm taking your money back. I wasn't a great student. So what did I do that first semester? Like every other first-year student does. I enjoyed my time. I had a really good time. And then those are the days when the grades went home. The grades got home before I got home. And when I got home, my mother had this letter. She's standing at the door, and she's saying, what are you doing? You knew the deal. You had to have a C or better. You don't even have anything near that. You better get on that phone and call him up. You blew it. So I called him up, and I said, you know what? You're probably right. You should have given that money to the black male, because I didn't live up to your expectation. You know what he said? He said, no, I believed you when I met you the first time. I know you can do this. Now you get back up on that train and do your job. We've never had this conversation again. We will never have it again. I want you to know I never failed again. That man gave me a chance. That family gave me a chance to succeed. From Pine Manor, I graduated from Manhattanville College. I've had a significant career. I met my husband during my career. I have 2 beautiful children and girlfriend here with me today, so I'm really happy that, you know, I've had the benefit of doing wonderful things, more than my parents, my grandmother could have ever had, and I appreciate that. But I'm also proud to tell you, as Father Peter said, I am the vice chair of this college. This is the 3rd year that I serve as vice chair of Pine Manor College. That is an honor and a privilege. I also serve on the Greenwich Audubon. I do that as well. That's my other little fun thing to do. But the piece that I want to share with you today is not only being vice chair. I have been invited to speak to Robert Kraft and Alan Leventhal on behalf of the college and Tom Brady on Tuesday evening. That's huge. That's huge. And you know why I've been asked to do that? To speak about why it's important to support students of color, to give them the opportunity so that they can be more like me, that are out there and see faces as such. And this is a shameless plug for Future 5, but I'm going to do it anyway, because that is what the mission is to take students that are under-resourced and wouldn't have that opportunity, to give them the opportunity so that they can be strong, resourceful young people and give back. So again, I want to thank you for your time, and I really appreciate sharing my story with you. I don't know if there's any questions, but I'm happy. If not, that's okay too. You can go home and sing Sweet Caroline. Yeah.
It's not. Oh,
Sorry.
Thanks, Jill. Not so much a question, but a story. My daughter, I have one daughter, and her 2 friends, they were 2 sisters, and these 2 girls, the mother was white and the father was African American, born in Africa. And I spent a lot of time with the 3 of them. On Wednesdays, the girls had half day, and so we would go and do all kinds of things together. And it was the only time in my life that I felt, just by having these 3 girls, I felt the racial tension. And I would go to restaurants, wherever I would go, I would see looks like people trying to figure it out, like, oh, what's going on? And it's like so strange, and it would be subtle. And then there was a case where I went to a fireplace store up in Wilton with the girls, and this is the first time that I really felt more than subtle reactions. And this gentleman, it was a Wednesday afternoon, and he was trying to figure out what was going on, and I was looking at gas fireplaces, and he said, why aren't your girls in school? And I said, they go to private school, they have half a day. So, and he was giving me prices, and I said, I don't think, I think it's a little more than I want to spend. And he said, oh, you'd spend money on private education, but you wouldn't, I just walked out of there so angry. And that was just one little tiny, I was like, wow, how this is Fairfield County, and this is real. And I actually felt privileged to have that experience because it made me a little more aware.
And that's the point, just to really be aware. It's going to happen. It's happened with my own family. It still happens. My husband, we had a commuter marriage. He'd be in California or he'd be someplace else. So, some of the times they would think I was the nanny picking up my daughter. But the one time that he did pick up Anya, all of a sudden, the girls that she was with, they all ran out because she was playing a softball game, and they all ran out and said, Coach, someone's trying to take Anya. It was her father. So it does happen. It's like we laugh about it now because it happens. It happened to me at the Y this past Friday. And, I hear like my 6 a.m. spin, and I think it was your sister-in-law was in there at the time, but she wasn't in there at that time. But 6 a.m., so this woman comes in, she comes, I'm so happy to see you this morning. I said, I'm happy to see you too. She says, I saw your husband here yesterday. I said, really? I said, and I just kind of backed away because my husband doesn't spin. But I do know the black guy that spins. But he wasn't there. So she made an assumption that I was married to the black guy that I happened to sit next to when he's there. And I just looked at her, I'm like, sometimes you just gotta you gotta it's hard, or you can become angry and you can, it's that knapsack, just unpack it. Because they're carrying their own weight. He's got his own stuff to deal with. So we're all gonna encounter these things. So this is a lifetime for us. Yeah.
So what did you say?
When she was,
How do you react?
well, at 6 a.m. when you're walking around your spandex and whatnot, you're barely awake. I kind of looked at her because I didn't have any words. I shared it with I couldn't think quick enough to tell her that wasn't my husband. My plan is when we go, the next time when he's there, I will check her. Because I know it'll happen, it'll be another time, but a nice way. Again, there's no shame or blame. She just made an assumption. People make assumptions. Yeah.
First, I want to thank you for doing, thanks. I want to thank you for doing all these conversations. But one thing that's been a challenge for me is that as a mother, a full-time working mom of 3 young kids, it's hard for me to come at 6 o'clock. And it's sometimes hard for me to come at 9 o'clock. Are there things happening in our community in New Canaan or Fairfield County that we can do with our kids or even during the day when we have childcare to engage these young families in these conversations? That's maybe even the kids.
I would love to see that. And I think that Father Peter maybe had a conversation with Tom last week about what are we going to be thinking about doing for children. Because honestly, it starts there. When I was at King, we started a program, a diversity understanding program, pre-K, because those conversations are going to go home. How great would it be for your child to check a parent, Mom, that's not right. You shouldn't say those kind of things. So our early ed programs, if we could do something within the church, I think that would be that. Maybe that's on our Sunday school program. Maybe that's part of the conversation where we speak about how we can, diversity and equity and inclusion for everyone. And it is hard with your schedule to get out in the evening. So these are good conversations that we can figure out. How do we do that? How do we make it better? Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lise. What came through to me was believing in young people, period, and supporting that, and having your grandmother and people in your life, and the gentleman who told you to go back to school because he believed in you, that you could do it, and that kind of support.
Yeah.
We can all do that. Color, whatever the issue is, but we can do that for young people. Very positive
Yeah.
talk, really, I feel very good about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing. And you know, thank you and Tom for, you know, bringing the awareness far north to the big guys. I think that's really, I mean, not the bishop, sorry, that guy. But thank you for what you've done. I haven't shared this with you, but I got a nice little note from the bishop asking, what are you prepared to do? I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. So thank you.
But that's the support, the follow-up, the support. When you see something in somebody.
You see something, say something. You see something, say something. Always. I will do it the next time.
So I want to talk about my good experience. I was a school social worker in Norwalk for 30 years. And in my early days, I realized that there were many grandmothers and grandfathers raising their grandchildren. So I decided to get them together as a support system, and we would meet every other week at the Norwalk Library in the evening. And there was one particular grandmother who I became friendly with, so much so that I called her Grandma. And she raised several of her children's children, and I would go to different schools. I got assigned to different schools, and Grandma kept showing up with a different group of children, which meant that she moved. And so we became even better friends. And her husband was on dialysis, as was my husband, so I met her husband, who was a wonderful gentleman. And I saw her at a conference, maybe 25 years into my first meeting her. I saw her at a child's conference, and I found out the next day that she had passed away very unexpectedly. And so I determined that I was going to get out of school and go to the funeral. And the funeral was in an African-American church in Norwalk. And I walked in, and I was the only white person there. And I have to tell you that people turned around and looked at me, and there were probably 20 people in this crowded church who stood up and screamed my name because they were the children that I had known for all those years, and their grandparents and their parents that I had worked with. And it was it was just a feeling that I can't even describe. So it works if you work it, but it takes work to work it. And you have to not be afraid to go to the projects to see people and make home visits and go where people are and do what people do. And, you know, it's one of the blessings in my life was that day to walk in there.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I have just one little tidbit. You know, you reminded me of a story. My husband and I took a trip in August to the Caribbean, and 2 days before we were to come home, he took a fall, fell head first. And here we are in the Caribbean, and they don't really have, it's not like Greenwich Hospital or Stanford Hospital. But thankfully, we had a friend that knew where to take us to where the locals go. And so he came by and picked us up, and I followed him to the hospital. Now, this hospital is an open-air hospital. Nothing of the modern conveniences that we've all known. We go into a room, and there's no one there that looks like my husband. They're all local people. My husband fell face first and had to have 14 stitches down the front of his head. Can't see it now. But we walked in there, and the doctor, probably the emergency room was no bigger than this little area right here. Tiny, tiny beds, nothing, all rusted and no desktops and computers of such. So you had to trust. So I watched Jeff lying there on that, cot there, and he's at such peace. I'm thinking about, oh my goodness, we're not used to seeing anything like this. I'm used to seeing people that are white taking care of you, not people that are brown. But this doctor came in dressed so nicely, nice coat, spoke well, did everything. He goes over to Jeff and he says, yep, I think you're going to need stitches. I'm going to put them in. He leaves to come back. He has a plastic apron on him. The white coat came off in a plastic apron. That time I'm starting to get a little nervous because I'm like, whoa, this is totally different from what I'm used to. The plastic apron, he comes over. His nurse comes over with him. The nurse has an iPhone for the light. So Jeff is so calm. He's just lying there like, he had so much faith that everything was going to go right. I'm sitting there watching this doctor with the nurse put the stitches in over and over, 14 stitches. We walk out of there, and there's no Medicare, there's no AARP, there's none of that stuff out there. We walk out, here's your bill. $200, pay right there. Pay our bill, and here's your prescription for your medicine. Go get that as well. We walked out of there $220 later, and he was well. They did tell us to come back to the doctor and have the sutures removed. The Greenwich doctor. So he went back to the Greenwich doctor, and the doctor looked at him. He said, wow, he did a great job. He did a really good job. You have no scar, no nothing. So you talk about trust and understanding, trust and obey, you'll know the way. But that's that was our story, that we've experienced those kinds of things as well, where you have to, go with the unknown and trust and believe. So
before you go, I love that story. I'd heard it before. Hey, Jeff, I know you look great, but I had a son who just had surgery, and my wife looked it up on the web, and it said that when men have facial scars, people think it's sexy. So sorry they did such a good job you didn't get that. So, Lise, we love it when you come before us and speak. We really do. And I just want to give everybody a pitch again. If you have been unable in the past to move your schedule around on one of these courageous conversations that you're designing and leading us through, they're just really, really, they make you feel more fully alive to be a part of those. And you've done incredible work, and everybody might not know that. It's just really, really great. I also want to say that we're really moved because you shared yourself with us, and that's what really moves us as brothers and sisters in Christ. And I think that St. Paul would be most pleased to have been quoted at full length from his letter there, because that's actually what Paul had in mind, that we're all one, and you just did that beautifully in your reference to Jesus washing your feet. I think both of them would be most pleased to be quoted by you. It's really, really beautiful. And I also want to say thank you for the vocation you have. Cliff in the back here, the work you do, I know the work you do for Future 5 really does impact lives, but you're also impacting our lives too. And so we're really grateful. And I'm psyched that you're going to say yes to the bishop and do some stuff with the Episcopal Church in Connecticut. So everybody, I'm also really pleased that all of your hearts are moved such that you get out of bed early to come and be a part of this, because this is nothing without all of you. It really isn't. And so the blessed movements of the Spirit in your hearts really do change the world, one conversation at a time. And thank you so much for all that. As you know, in our Fully Alive series, we are seeking to understand how we might be fully alive to the glory of God and have our lives be more meaningful to us, right? As we give ourselves away for the love of Christ in all aspects of our lives. And the next 2 weeks, we're going to switch to work. And next Sunday morning, we're going to have a biblical scholar from Yale, a good friend of Father Justin's, a man named Matt Crossman, and he's going to be the teacher and the preacher. Matt is a man of great, great substance and wonderful humanity. And then the following Sunday morning, Norah Gallagher, who is an incredibly gifted writer and beautifully and deep human being, who's a friend of Reverend Elizabeth, is going to be here. If you don't know Nora's work, just go plug her name in on the web. So peace and blessings to you. And thank you so much, and thanks to everybody. Bless. Yep.